Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my good friend and colleague, Cara St. Louis, returns to the show. Cara is an author and an alternative researcher. She has two great books out at the moment. One is The Sun Thief, and her most recent title is Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. Cara is currently working on a workbook, which is a deep and radical follow-up to the original text of Dangerous Imagination. The book is now available for pre-order, and the link is in the show notes below. Tonight's conversation with Cara is wide-ranging as always. She begins our discussion by speaking for the first time about the falling out with her co-author, Harold Kautzvella, and why they parted ways. Cara then talks to us about her follow-up to Dangerous Imagination and the deep, radical thinking approaches she is weaving into the workbook, which will cover such topics as the fabrication of history, savior programming, the sun's role in sustaining life, and how humanity can break free of the Matrix. And to kick the show off, I asked Cara if she could tell us how and why the partnership with Harold is no longer in play. And here is what she had to say.
Harold Kautzvella, as you know, is a tremendously interesting guy. He really is. He's just really interesting. But I think he's probably been compromised for a lot longer than I knew, or maybe he's been fighting it for a lot longer than I knew. But I'm going to give you the timeline so that people can kind of understand where I'm coming from with all of this, and how, in fact, he really did attempt to sabotage our project deeply. People kind of don't understand what it is that he did, well, wait, how is it that sabotaged the project, So I can take us through the numbers in 3 or 4 minutes, and then you'll, I'm sure, have questions. So, no, I haven't talked to Harold since I started trying to slap him around and let him know that he was taken, that something was very, very wrong. And then he issued a video that I still haven't seen because I don't want to see any of that, because that's Harold possessed. That's not Harold, actually. That's something else talking through Harold. And I have no truck with that. Whatever that thing is not something that I want to have a relationship with. So I don't consent to having a relationship to whatever it is that's living in Harold Kautzvella right now. So I met Harold in 2012, early 2012 probably, the fall of 2012. And I met him because he was part of a kind of a small array of translators presented to me by the woman who picked up The Sun Thief and was going to have it translated and published in Germany. And when I saw his name, I absolutely did know that I needed to work with this guy, that this guy was important, and I needed to have him on The Sun Thief. So that's how I operate, as you know. It's really just pure intuition for me. And so I may have said this on a show. I certainly may have said it to you, but it wasn't too long after I decided to have Harold. He was stuck in Norway. He had just given the Open Mind Conference that we ended up having as the basis of his half of Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. And he couldn't get back. He had no money. So the fact that he was translating this book and my publisher gave him something like 3,000 euros up front meant he could get back to his family. And he was very grateful about that. So I thought, good, that must be why I grabbed him, because he needed it, And it turned out he was a pretty good translator. He really is. And then he sort of what amounts to hitchhiked across Germany and the sea between us and the continent, the British Channel, and showed up on our doorstep to meet me. Just sort of trust in the universe that people were going to take care of him, and in fact they did. So we met him and we talked to him, and he was obviously esoterically very profound. I quite liked him, and then he went back to Germany. It took him about 3 months to do the book, because he wasn't doing anything else and he'd been paid, and it was something he really, really wanted to do. So fast forward, he actually also, though, can be extremely difficult to work with. He's something of a prima donna. He's something of a control freak. It's okay. Lots of us are like that. Okay. And, it just ended up being probably good that he was in Germany and I was here, and life went on. And then we ended up in March, end of February, beginning of March, in Saarbrücken on the same lecture panel. And I took one look at the guy, and I knew we had something we needed to do. I said, Harold, there's something we're supposed to write together. I don't know what it is yet, but there's something. And he agreed. And so I sat down to write my half of Dangerous Imagination, which is the social engineering half. And he decided that he would put in the open mind lecture and add to that. And that is what became the skeleton of the book. But then, Michael, you may remember there was a point at which it came out in English in December of 2012. No, December of this last year, 2014. Yeah, December 2014. You may remember interviewing us and then getting a hold of Harold and him having this big piece of information to deliver that, in fact, the chemtrails were affecting our RNA. Do you remember? And there wasn't anything we could do about it. We were cooked.
Yep.
You remember that one?
Yep.
Well, he asked me at the time, he had not finished, well, there were lots of things going on at the time, but he asked me if I could pull the book back off the English market and add that chapter in English, and I absolutely refused to do that because I don't believe that for a second. I'm not putting anything out that says that we're cooked, that we don't have a shot, that we don't have a chance. I don't believe it. It's not true. Okay. So when he started to talk like that, I started to wonder how, because he's always been extremely positive and extremely sure about human beings' power. So there was that. And then he was still trying to, there were two things that were going on. We had just conducted a very important interview in Leipzig, he and I, with a very important alternative talk show host called Michael Vogt. He gets like 30 million hits a month. He's huge, okay? And he's wonderful. And we'd gone on a show in October in English, and Harold was supposed to translate that into German so we could get it out into the German population quickly, which it's still never been translated into German to this day.
The interview? Okay.
No, the interview's still never been translated into German. And it was huge. I flew from London and all of those sorts of things. Anyway, a couple things that happened during that trip that were very, very important. And everybody can put this together however they want to. You can too, because I trust you to do things like that. First of all, he asked me if I would. You have to understand that Harold and I are good friends. We have lots and lots of deep conversations, very personal conversations, very trusting conversations. That was never a question for me. But during this trip, two things happened. First of all, he wanted me to get him in touch with David Icke, which I absolutely refuse to do anymore. I'd wash my hands of Icke after the TPV debacle because he did that on purpose, in my opinion, which means he has no integrity. Now, granted, remember, I just said, in my opinion, all right, in my opinion. So I wasn't going to try to get him in touch with David Icke. But the thing that he told me to tell Icke was, he said, you tell David Icke I'm Draco. Okay. So,
oh, boy.
Okay. Yeah, oh, boy. He really wanted to get in touch with Icke, and he was telling me he was Draco, and I don't think that he necessarily keeps that to himself. He just doesn't broadcast it. If you listen to his interviews, you'll hear him talk about the apes periodically, the apes, okay, with a slightly derogatory tone.
Just so I can keep the timeline kind of square in my head, Cara. This discussion we're having now where he wanted to meet David Icke, how long ago was that?
October 2014.
October 2014. Okay.
We were still in Leipzig. We were probably walking to the train station to get back to Berlin. It was that kind of, that's why I know exactly when it happened. It was during that period of time.
Okay. All right. So a little over a year ago. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going through Berlin, and he wanted me to come out to the farm where he lives with his girlfriend, Maureen, whom I still haven't met. And I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to, Mike. I never have 5 minutes to myself. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to go check into the hotel, hang out by myself, and then get on the plane in the morning. Okay, so this is exactly what I did. The next morning I got up, I got on the plane, I went back to London, and then I realized that I had a blister on both elbows, a blister on both knees, and a big old fingerprint on my sternum, like someone had poked me with their index finger really hard. And I had no idea where they came from. None of this. No idea where that stuff came from. All right, so at that point I checked in with this guy that he's a little bit out there, but he's also for real in most ways. I checked with Jay Essex about that, and he said that I had been checked out. He said, did you feel a presence in the room? And I said, no, but I felt like I had to go to sleep. I was going to go to sleep, and that was that. And he said, well, they were just checking on you. It was friendlies, and actually someone put a hand right inside your chest to check your heart.
Now, who told you this?
Jay Essex. Jay Essex is somebody I know who's walking the line all the time between He's a very powerful psychic. Some of the stuff he says is a little bit out there, but mostly he's absolutely spot on with the stuff that he says. I've had lots and lots of traffic with him, and he's absolutely authentic. So
okay, so
anyway,
you went so before you went to sleep, there was nothing wrong. You didn't have any blisters or anything with your body, and then you woke up.
Yeah, I got a blister on each freaking elbow, which I didn't know till I got in the bathtub, and I went, "Wow, that hurts. What's that?" And a blister on my both knees, and this big old fingerprint bruise right on my sternum, Mike. That's the thing that really, if it had just been blisters on my elbows and my knees, I would have thought, God, I ate something I'm allergic to, or
Yeah.
But no, the fingerprint. Anyway, so those two things happened when I was in Berlin with Harold. And then I think we talked to you after that because the book wasn't quite out yet. Now, Harold was supposed to translate the book. It took him freaking ever. He just couldn't seem to make himself get around to doing it. And in the end, we had to hire somebody to finish it, even though he'd been paid. And when he came up with that chapter that you and I just discussed, that's when he said, oh, now I see why the book hasn't allowed itself to be translated, because it needs to have that chapter. Well, my question is, where the hell did that chapter come from? It's so give up, humanity. We've gotcha. Do you know what I mean? Where did it come from? Anyway, so
this is the chapter that he wanted you to add. You said no because
I said, no,
it's just too doom and gloom.
It's too doom and gloom. It may be out in the German version. I don't know. My German publisher is really outrageous at not letting me know what's going on or any of that. She's just anyway. Regardless, God bless the Germans because they've been awfully good to me. I have to say that. My publisher, notwithstanding. Okay, so anyway, here we are. We're going through the spring. It was June of 2015. June of 2015. I've done a couple of interviews for Miles Johnston, during which I've talked about Harold a little bit because Harold is quite the guy, and said, Miles, we've got to get you access to Harold, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was scheduled to do a microconference in June for Miles Johnston with Simon Parks. And Simon Parks bailed at the last minute. So we brought Harold in for just an overnight. And Harold, as you know, was tremendously popular from the word go with the English-speaking audiences. However, I don't know that Harold was actually ever particularly comfortable in English. English is a tough arena. English is a powerful language. And Harold is has a real Eastern European kind of shell, if you will. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. The same reason I don't try to traffic in German and explain these extremely sensitive and sometimes technical processes in Germany is, why he can get himself into trouble in England or in English. And so I think he had a couple of incidents. But, he also became this rock star he quite quickly became this rock star of
I saw that.
Yeah,
the number of
right?
interviews really ramped up. I mean, he did the interview with you, and Harold did the interview with me.
Yeah.
And then soon after that, I would say maybe a couple of months after that, more of these interviews started booking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he really started to catch fire. I'll tell you that the interview that he did with me, the original one talking about black goo, is one of the most popular interviews on my channel. It has over 20-something thousand views. Sure. So, yeah, I know that he started to pick up because I didn't watch all of the interviews, but I would see them coming into my YouTube feed. I'm like, oh, well, good for Harold.
Yeah.
Because that was the intent in the beginning, right? You said to me, we need to get Harold more traction because the message is important.
Exactly. And the fact that people wanted to listen to him was nothing but good,
right, right.
At that point. Okay, so then I was supposed to be at the international conference and Miles's film competition this last July, and I couldn't be there. I needed to be in the United States for family reasons, but Harold went. Harold went, and he was there with a couple of super soldiers. I can't remember their names now. You know that couple, Max Spears and Sarah. Can't remember her last name. I will. Anyway, they're very popular super soldiers, and some other great people were there, and Harold was there. And that's when things started to go south really, really badly, Mike. I mean, first of all, he sent me an email at that point saying that when Max and Sarah had come into the room, Harold had seen 4 giant spiders come into the room at the same time. Well, okay, we do talk about spiders, don't we? And we talk about the kinds of things that live in computers. What is it? That scuttlers. That's what Miles talks about. But Miles, as Miles says, if you can see them, then they're running you. Do you know what I mean? You have a relationship with these kinds of things. So just having him say that to me was extremely alarming. Also, he and I both wanted to talk to Sarah badly. We're both sort of drawn to Sarah, and he wanted to talk to Sarah because he said that he thought that they were related in some way and that she was channeling AI. Okay, fine. I didn't get to go, so I let him do what Harold does. And he didn't think that I should interview them because I want to try to do some work. I'd like to try to do some work with you, and I'd like to try to do some work with Miles Johnson and those sorts of things. And I was thinking of interviewing I was thinking, wouldn't it be kind of cool if Harold and I sat down at a table with those two? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That could be a really killer interview. But he told me not to do it because he said they're basically weapons. Well, okay, they're super soldiers. Yes, they'll probably tell you that themselves, you know. And then we started getting this stuff about Harold talking about being, possessed by alien beings, and the fact that, and he said that Jesus had been born again, and that Jesus was 2 years old. And I mean, he just really kind of started to unravel in a big way over the summer, and had, for some reason, the locus was this international conference in England, and everybody who interviewed him was a piece of garbage, and he went to town destroying them, and he just sort of went off, man. And when I started to get wind of this, because obviously he wasn't telling me any of this stuff at all. I was hearing about this peripherally, and people were sending me interviews going, "Are you aware of this?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not aware of this." He also told me in the parking lot of the barge one night after the micro conference, I said, "You know what, Harold, I need to come." That was in June. "You know what? I need to come and finally meet your girlfriend, Maureen." And he said, "Okay, but when you come, if you meet Maureen, be sure you don't have any issues because she's ruthless." Now, what the hell does that mean?
Well,
I mean, do you see what I was like? Wow, what's happening here? What's happening? So
that's not like a real warm fuzzy.
No, it's not. And she's a shaman. She's a very powerful shaman, according to Harold. But what else is she? Is she running him? Is she his handler? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never seen her. He was trying to bring her forward for a while there. He was trying to bring her forward on Facebook, which I actually thought was kind of funny because, and I sent him a message. I said, "Harold, what are you doing, man? Are the girls chasing you? Does Maureen want you to put her out there?" And he said, yeah, that's it. The girls are chasing me. So Maureen is now going to be my partner, more obviously my partner. Well, that made sense. I mean, gosh, I'm a girl. I understand that. But I don't know if that's actually what was happening. And then when I heard this interview he did with Higher Side Chats,
yep,
I immediately started blasting him with questions, saying, "Dude, you are taken. You're taken. You're taken. You're taken. Stop it. You're all over the place now." People, there were some clairvoyants whom I also trust very deeply over here that are connected to the Basis Project, who tried to have a look at what was going on with Harold and said that essentially he's as close to dead as he can be and still be walking around, but there's something in there. So that's where I'm at, Mike. And how did he sabotage the project? Very in a nutshell. Well, that project had 2 prongs. It was a no excuses book. It was his side, which was the science, so, quote unquote science, and it was my side, which was the social engineering. And it was the how and the why together, so that there couldn't really be any bailout on what was going on. So what he did was try to get me to stop publication of the book with his half in it, which he couldn't do because he would be breaking all kinds of publishing laws. So he couldn't get me to do that. And what he did was release his half of the book as a free PDF on the internet. So what that means is people don't necessarily read the 2 parts of the book together the way they were put out, do they? And what how does that sabotage it? Well, it means that the whys don't get heard, doesn't it? You want to read Harold's part because he's very popular and it's all esoteric and there's demons and things like that. But it eliminates some possibility of mine being heard. Now, it didn't really work out that way. Sales stayed pretty good, but
But the agreement was that the book would be a joint venture, right?
you better believe it.
Right. So to go off, and I'm giving my opinion here, to go off and then extract your piece of the book out and say, well, you know what? I'm just going to go do my own thing after you agreed that it was going to
Exactly.
be a joint venture isn't right.
Right. No, of course it's not. And it's absolute. If people don't get that the sabotage, that's sabotage now. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's absolute sabotage.
But I wanted to ask you, though, Cara, so that some of the audience can catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let me just give a little background. When I had Harold on the show, I think it was the first time that he was really speaking in the U.S., I think. And so he talked about the black goo, and he talked about EMF, and he talked about DNA, RNA, and all that stuff. And it was very popular stuff. It was very, like you said, very esoteric, but it was extremely intriguing.
Yeah.
Now, what happened since then? Like, where did, in your opinion, did he go off the rails? Where did he get basically, how do I say this, a little too esoteric?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Well,
where
yeah.
you said, you know what, hey, Harold, what's going on here? Because if you keep going down that path, we are going to have a credibility issue
Right.
because you're going to become not believable,
Exactly.
right? So what were some of the examples where you picked up on that?
First, it was the RNA lecture that he gave us. Yeah, there's no hope at all. And then it was the Miles Johnston's International get together where then he lambasted everybody who came within 5 feet of him. And honestly, maybe he's right. I don't know. But the way he went about it was so reactionary. Do you know? If you'd had a private word with me about this or that and said, what do you think? And, that sort of thing. But he didn't. He just started making independent videos, blasting Miles, blasting the clairvoyants that he worked with when he was there. And basically just, as a matter of fact, Miles Johnston brought me that. Miles had sent me a text asking me if we wanted to do Ireland and Scotland next year. He was putting together some kind of tour. And I said, sure, absolutely. And then the next day he texted me back and he goes, you know what? There are videos that your friend is putting out in German, just crapping all over everything that ever happened to him in England, which, by the way, you can't find now. What a shock, Mike. They disappeared as soon as we sort of started calling him on them. And the other thing is, he sent me one of the things that, okay, here's another thing. Here's how I always know there's a demon on board related to Harold. When I started saying, look, you people are backing out, people are dropping invitations, people are, you've just gone too far. You can't, if you're possessed, we got to deal with that. And now you're making an announcement to the world and just all this stuff. You've been taken. We have to do something about it. He sends me back this email, indeed, at the very beginning of which was typically, Harold, look, you go, you do all of those things. It doesn't matter whether we're both there, blah, 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 which of course was not an option for me because it just wasn't. Because my credibility came under fire when his came under fire. And then at the bottom of this freaking email, I went, there's the demon. It said, oh, but I do have to say it's rather embarrassing how much attention you seem to need. And do you hear that? Do you hear that in my voice when I say that? I can feel it on the back of my neck when I say it. And I thought, that's a demon talking.
He was talking about you?
About me. He never would have said,
Yeah.
it's a bit embarrassing how much attention you seem to need, Cara. And I was like, whoa, where the hell did that come from? We're out there lecturing and we've got this book. What are you talking about, man? And now, every once in a while, it's really funny, I'll put something up. It just happened recently, about a week ago. I'll put something up. I don't hear from Harold, but I'll put something up, and in the comment section, someone will say, wow, you really need a lot of attention, don't you? And I think, ooh, there's that demon again. But he told Miles Johnston they were on a lecture tour. Well, they were at the same lecture in Poland recently in November, and he told Miles that he had just had 5 demons exorcised. So A, what? And B, If he had, I'd know about it, because if whatever's in him that's steering the ship right now was gone, he'd have called me. He'd have emailed me immediately and said, "Oh, you're right. I was taken. I was messed up. Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry." Just whatever. But I haven't heard from him, and he has no intention of contacting me.
I remember listening to the Higher Side chat. Well, let me just rephrase that. I remember trying to listen to it.
Yeah.
And I got about halfway through it, and I couldn't listen to it anymore because, and Harold, if you're listening to this, I'm just giving you my opinion, because if it was me, there were probably many others that felt the same way.
Right.
It was like he was off the rails.
Yeah.
And it had gotten so bizarre and so strange, and I'm trying to remember the specifics, but it's not coming to me right now. It was months ago.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, I'm not going to listen to any more of this because this is so over the top and it's so weird that I have better things and other things to focus on that are more tangible that we can address to try to get the ship turned around. And I do remember also, I think you mentioned it earlier in our discussion here, that he did like a home video and he had your name in the title of the...
that one.
And
I haven't listened to it. I don't want to.
Yeah. And so it's really too bad, to be honest with you, because...
It is. And I was worried at the very beginning of it. I thought, I don't know what the hell's going to happen to this book, this very, very important book, I was really gratified that we stayed at about 80% of the month before. Yeah. And that's because the book, prior to him having this meltdown or this whatever the hell it is, the book's great. It in and of itself is a very important book, but he lost you're right, he went off the rails. There was an interview in Germany at some point where he was part of, the Q&A afterward that they will sometimes have when they line up everybody. And they asked Harold, what's it like to lecture all the time? And he does. He loves to lecture. He loves being on stage. What's it like to lecture all the time like this? And he said it's like having sex, actually. I mean, he just was starting to slide, man. Now that's just not okay, Mike, to say stuff like that. It's like having sex. You know what I mean?
That's a cult of celebrity. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a person who says those types of things is enamored with the fact that they have some kind of celebrity status.
Right.
And, they really thrive in feeling important, wanting to believe that what they're saying is so impactful that people are just all ears for them. So,
right.
I have to say this, and I'm not picking on Harold, because there are a lot of people in the alternative movement and the truth movement who operate this way and think this way. It's bad, because when you get caught up in that way of thinking, you're running in the same mindset, the same pack as the people that you used to call out.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You fall into the exact same trap, and it becomes about ego.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, and
right?
That allowed something in, didn't it? But the thing is, nothing can come in unless you allow it or ask it to. That's the bottom line. He made a deal with something. He wants something real bad, Mike, and he made a deal, and that's what's going on. And I don't know if we'll ever get him back. I don't think he's comfortable in English anyway, in the English-speaking world anyway. And I think there are a lot of people who are just kind of onto his stuff. And he can't get anywhere in the English-speaking world now unless he makes things right with me, because anything less is going to be extremely suspect. And I am really suspect of Harold Couchvella at this point. He's got this is savior programming. This is savior programming writ large. He's a guru. This is cultist kind of stuff. We talk about the cult of personality in the activist arena everywhere, but certainly in the United States, which is why I came to London. One of the reasons I came to London, because I just couldn't function in the Hollywoodization of what was up with most of the activists in the States. It's just absolute bullshit. It's just part of the deal. It's just part of the negative stuff. So anyway, so that's why I wanted to talk about Harold, because for months and months now, 3 months, I suppose, I said I'm not going to talk about it because I have to stay neutral about it. I can't get emotional about it because then I'll get sucked in somehow.
I can vouch for that, by the way, Cara. I can vouch for that. Okay, that you did not want to say anything Right.
Because then whatever's got him could get a claw into me, and I don't want that.
Well, it also becomes an unproductive tit for tat, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we have moved on. So here's what I'm doing, Mike. Right now, first of all, I'm still teaching, so I've just had 2 or 3 days off. We're on break over here, and trying to get my old body, sort of rested up a little bit, from 23 9-year-olds beating on me all the time. I love them. Don't get me wrong, I love them. But wow, does that take an effect? I take it out of you. So, but what I'm doing right now on the break, I'm not going to the States. I'm staying in London this year and being with my husband, which is great. I also have some projects I'm working on, as always. Number one, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation is still a crackerjack book. It is still out there for sale. I just got some feedback from Alfred Levermont Weber about it, which just put me over the moon. I was like, sweet! He's read it. Stuart Swerdlow has read it. That means something to me, okay? They seem to know about it. Good enough, right? Good enough. And so what I decided to do was make a trilogy out of it. I'm calling it the Imagination Chronicles because in the end it has to be positive, Mike. It has to be about recognizing our power again, and reclaiming who we are as cosmic beings, which is rare and beautiful and so freaking important that predators are after us. Please remember that. I mean, there is no such thing as evil has won and we just have to give up and get over it. Not where I'm coming from. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're just a prize. We are a prize that they're still after. Evil has not won, or we would know that. So the Imagination Chronicles. The first one's out. That's the one Harold and I did together. The second one I'm working on right now, it's called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation Workbook. I sent you the rough outline of the chapters I'm working on right now. I hope my friend Mike was a bit blown away by the radical. Hopefully he sees this as radical, because I sure as hell want it to be radical, because I think it needs to be. We need to kick each other out of bed. And what's happened to us is radical. So it's only about fighting fire with fire. Now for me, for example, the chapter I'm working on right now, there are so many historians out there, Mike, so many people working on the fact that we've had between 300 and 1,000 years of false history inserted into our timeline. Ta-da! Yep. That's number one. Okay, number one is that. That's what I'm working on right now.
Well, Cara, before you, let me just say this. When I received your outline, there was two things, two chapters that actually really caught my attention. And first of all, let me just say this. The radical thinking part of it is absolutely right. We have to radically think. If you're going to think traditionally, conservative, within the same paradigm that we're actually stuck in, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to make any change. So you have to think outside the box, drastically outside the box.
Right.
The second thing is when you talked about the great forgetting.
Yeah.
I had put a video up, I guess about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago up on the blog, and it was called the Phantom Time Hypothesis. Which claims that the period between 614 AD and 911 AD did not exist.
At least, yeah.
And the historian is a German historian. His name is Heribert Illig, ILLIG, and he had ILLIG, and this was back in 1986 that he had proposed this and said that part of history, the early medieval times, was all constructed, that it never actually happened. And of course the Roman Church was heavily involved in it, other secret societies. So it's very, very interesting. So when I read The Great Forgetting Indeed, and then I recall the post I put up about 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was very weird. I thought to myself, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because that's what's up right now, Mike. We're getting ready to bust through that.
Yeah.
It's not just me. I'm just doing doing things the way I do them, which is to try to be very sort of common understanding about various things that people can then run with and do their own investigating to whatever level it works for them at that time. Yeah. But the Great Forgetting, actually, I did not make that up. That there was an article put out, I can't remember, or a book. No, that's the title of a book put out a while back, which is true. The Great Forgetting is true, but it's also false, because what the guy's talking about is history that probably, yeah, we forgot it, but did it ever actually exist? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So this is the conundrum. This is where we find ourselves, knowing that history is absolutely unreliable. You cannot use history to quote unquote prove anything, and yet there's also truth there. There has to be truth. If there is no truth in what they do to us, the spell won't work. It's black magic,
Yes.
right? And they have to tell us what they're doing in some way, or it just doesn't work. So yes, there is truth in there, and there are people out there doing some tremendous work, and I'm deeply into working on that chapter as well. The list of scholars who absolutely know that our timeline has been monkeyed with is very long and very prestigious, really. And no matter what you might think about Isaac Newton, we all have our opinions about Isaac Newton. Now, he was a chronologist as well, and he knew immediately that things had been messed with. And the way that the people knew things had been messed with were, it was the astronomers. The astronomers were sort of tracking the planets and tracking the phases of the moon and eclipses and things like that, and it didn't add up. It just didn't add up. So they knew something was wrong, and they could identify periods of time that couldn't possibly have happened. So there's 300 to 1,000 years that just didn't happen. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you can, if you want an example, and I'm talking to the audience here, of how history can be altered. All you need to do is look at the current events. Look at what's taking place today. Let's take an example, right? 9/11. There's an official story out there. Well, that official story becomes history if it's allowed to.
Right.
And so 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when people are reading books or kids are reading history books, if that history is not altered to reflect the actual truth of what happened, then people are going to get the fairy tale version 50 years, 100 years, 200 years from now. So I want people to think about that, because this is how it happens. Now, if they can do things like this in an era where we have all of this technology, we have the ability, we have the internet, we have cameras, we have all of this stuff that allows us to be able to catch these things and correct them. If you go back 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that type of technology was not there. So they can basically do whatever it is they wish to do, because they controlled the books, they controlled the publishing, as they do today.
Right. So why does this particular chapter, why does this actually matter? Well, you start to stray into territory where it's so big, people can't hold it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you start saying things like there's 1,000 years, one way to think about that is that it's not really 2015, it's 1015. Okay? That's a way to just use the eraser. Then the question becomes, what actually did happen? There's a lot of this stuff is coming out of Russia now, you see. Russia's opening up and things are coming out, and a lot of people in Russia. There's a fellow called Anatoly Fomenko, Fomenko. He was an astronomer, and he's one of the people who most clearly and vocally described this idea that a lot of the history could not have happened. Another thing, there's a woman who's working. I have to say this about this woman who's working. She's in Austria right now. I think she's Russian. She's certainly from the Eastern Bloc based on her accent. But her YouTube channel is called New Earth, one word, Newearth, The Survivors, okay? And she is doing she's only one of my sources, but she is doing absolutely phenomenal work in revealing the fact that like for example, survivors of Atlantis had been with us until as late as 200 years ago, all over the globe, Mike, and she can prove it. You just have to go through her work step by step. So one of the things I'm doing is with her and some other people, Fomenko and some other people, is trying to sort of extract enough of a path so that people will understand why I think that this is the case and where they need to go to find out some more about it. And there's 9 chapters in this workbook. That's why I call it the workbook, that are very much like that. There were the Council of Nicaea. We all should know what what a hatchet job on the human race happened at the Council of Nicaea when they decided, quote unquote, which form of Christianity they were going to lay on us, essentially. Not which one was right, which one they were going to lay on us.
Yeah, or
Which
whether Jesus was
story,
God or not. Yeah.
yeah, which story they were going to give us. So
Right.
at that time, I think we moved to the Gregorian calendar, and when they developed a calendar, they could tell us anything they wanted to tell us. Up, here's the calendar. This is what it is, and this is a population that may or may not know anything about calendars or history or any of that stuff. And there were two Jesuits, actually, surprise, surprise, who were heavily involved in the fabrication of the last 1,000 years. I'm going to tell you their last names. You can look them up. One was called Scaliger, Scalager, or Scaliger. It's probably Scaliger. And the other one's called Pitavius, Pitavius. Those were two Jesuits whose mission appears to have been to rewrite history. There's another thing we need to know. If you look at documents, this is something that the New Earth person, who's prolific and yet elusive at the same time, I may go to Austria to interview her. She doesn't want her. She wants no fame. That's the problem. You've got to go where she is and talk to her. She doesn't want any fame. So she's prolific, but she's a bit elusive. Anyway, it was such that one of the ways to write Jesus Christ post Council of Nicaea was Eusus with an I. And in one of the ways that people dated documents to indicate that it was post Jesus Christ wasn't AD. It was with a little tiny I at the beginning of the date. So if you take a looking glass to many, many documents, millions of documents from the Middle Ages, what you're not seeing 1492. You're not seeing 16 something or 13 something. If you look very carefully, you're seeing a little tiny dotted I and then 3 digits.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not 1635. That's 635 years after the birth of Christ. That's what that little I means. Okay? But if you let those sorts of misunderstandings go, then it's easy to insert 1,000 years. One of the reasons Thomas Sheridan is somebody I really admire, although some of the stuff that he gets off into, I think is kind of a red herring. But by and large, the guy's spot on. If you have a chance to listen to him, he says, and I agree, that every monarchy around the world is of the same bloodline, probably of the Prussian bloodline, which God knows what that actually is. But this 1,000 years was manufactured to justify the rulers in place for the last 200 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and how would we know? How would we know, Mike? Because we got put in these schools. How the hell would we know? We got lined up in these desks and fed whatever the hell they wanted to feed us, and that's what they're still doing.
Right. That was my example with 9/11. I mean, 100 years from now, you're going to look at that. How are you going to know? That's what they fed you.
Yeah. And when it was 1805, which was just over 200 years ago, that the Prussian education system sort of came into being, and the push for it to go global was on. And now, I mean, that's what the first half of the book is about anyway.
Cara, you're going to package this together. In other words, this particular chapter or set of chapters is going to explain this whole thing with forgotten time or time that never existed.
Yep, it is, and I will try to give you exactly I will give you the very best references so that you can go and look at this for yourself and make up your own mind. That's really, I think, what my job is with all of this stuff. And then there's this whole I have to credit my husband quite a bit because there's a lot of work going on in Germany, Mike. A tremendous amount of work going on in Germany that we sure as hell don't know about in the English-speaking world. And if it wasn't for him bringing me this stuff, researching, I wouldn't know about it. And so this is why I often stop and say, thank God for the Germans, because they're working their asses off. But you have to be able to speak German to know what they're doing. And one of the things that's going on is there's a lot of institutional evidence, the research going on that proves that such things as something like 24,000 calories of light if you want to call it calories, it's not really calories, biophotonic energy is what it is, goes through our body daily. We use it somehow. We use it somehow, and that's in comparison to what? 1,500 calories of quote-unquote food that actually goes into our body. I think that one of my chapters is how do human beings actually sustain themselves? If you see that one right in front of you, that has probably some of the most radical statements it will have at the beginning of the chapter that you will read in the book. There's a fellow called Jericho Sunfire. He's says, and I believe him, but he says after 17 years of trying, he is a well-established breatharian. He calls it inedia, not eating, and he calls it the big secret.
Yeah.
He calls it the big secret, and if he says all that's wrong with the world would fall if we only knew the big secret.
This was the other one that I mentioned earlier. There was 2 chapter topics in the outline that you sent me that resonated with me. Now, it was a film that came out earlier in 2015, and I bought it, and it's called In the Beginning There Was Light. Is it possible to live on light alone?
Yep, I saw it.
Okay.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you for pushing that film.
Yeah. No, I bought the film, and it's a brilliant, brilliant film. Good. And when you had this as part of your outline, I thought to myself, bingo, there we go again. Mm-hmm. Brilliant minds think alike.
Well, this is what it is. This is what it is. And the other thing that Sunfire says is every time we walk outside, when we move, we're creating something. We're creating energy when we move, as long as we're in the presence of the sun.
Right.
Now, let's go all the way back to my first topic, Mike, which is why the hell are they trying to get between us and the sun?
Oh, yeah.
With chemtrailing.
Yeah.
Okay? They're cutting us off from something that nourishes us, from something that we use to materialize, to manifest on this planet. It's all about the sun. Yeah. It's all about the sun because it's all about the light. We are creatures of light. Rudolf Steiner, who I bring up every once in a while, he said it's all about the breath. The whole secret is in the breath. Now, in 1924, he kind of left us with that, with us not knowing what the heck he was talking about. But he said that more than once. The secret is in the breath. It's all about the breath. And if we in fact if it has been proven that 24,000 units of biophotonic energy goes through our bodies every day, Jericho Sunfire says we're a filter, the human body is a filter, then why the hell do we need this other stuff, this junk that they pour into us? Now, I have to always say this, Mike, when I say this on a radio show or on a television show, we live in a belief system, and belief systems are mighty powerful, and they can kill you if you're not very, very careful. So Mike and I are not espousing that you should stop eating.
The way I look at this stuff, and you tell me if you agree,
okay,
these are hidden or occulted elements of existence that we do not know about because they have been suppressed.
Yes.
And Cara's exactly right, that there's a reason why they keep blocking the sun with chemtrails. Now, I know there are many aspects with regard to why they chemtrail, but one of them, and I do believe is one of the most important, is the fact that they do not want the sun to be what it really is to humanity, which is a lifeline.
Yep.
Right? So they want to cut that cord so that it makes us even weaker, if you will, and it makes us more dependent on whatever it is that they're going to push out to say, look, this is the food you're going to eat. That's how I look at this, is that there's more room, a lot more room for us to investigate and research and find out more about what existence really is, because it's not what we've been taught. That's for sure. No, absolutely not.
And I'll tell you something else. Remember that when you go to look up this guy's stuff on YouTube, and I hope you will, I'll put down some links for you. It's not Jazz Muheen and all those people. This who are very new agey. This guy was a professional rugby league player, who came out of the ghettos of London and took 17 years to get where he was going. And he said anything that's less than that kind of a period of time isn't what we're doing. It takes a long time to spiritually get to this back to this point. And also, it's not for everybody this time around. I would love to be able to do it. It's just a kick in the pants. But you know what? I've been told by Jay Essex told me, if you stop eating this time around, you will die. He said, you cannot do it right now. So maybe that's true, maybe it's not. The main thing is in going through the journey that I'm going to take people through in that chapter, they will really understand that human beings are sustained by way more than Mickey D's cheeseburgers, okay? That's poison. That all of this stuff, if it didn't come out of the ground, in my opinion, if it's got a face and a mother, I don't know if you're a vegetarian or not, Mike, but if it had a face and a mother, we ought not to be eating it, because I don't believe that life feeds on life. I think that's a big con. I think it's, especially based on the fact that biophotons are probably the primary source of our sustenance on the planet. Your saliva. See, this is another thing that's been picked up by the mighty Bonacci. Bonacci talks to this guy all the time too. He interviews Jericho all the time as well. But he says that we make 8 cups of saliva every day. When it says drink 8 glasses of water, we make 8 cups of saliva. So is that really what we mean, or really what was intended? I don't know. But we really need to get in there and figure out what's going on here. And we need to get in there and figure it out fast. And that's just about breaking free of the entrainment. One of the examples I use about what it can look like is, remember when Britney Spears shaved her head and went after that car with an umbrella?
Yep.
I mean, that's what it looks like when you break programming. It's not pretty. It's not necessarily pretty. It's sort of sudden and jarring and violent, and but there was something about that moment that was also someone saying, I don't consent anymore.
Yeah, and that's what happens when the programming, see, that's why they have to continue the programming, because it's not a natural state of being.
Right.
Because your true self wants to constantly come out, wants to break out, it wants to express itself. So they constantly, when I say they, I'm talking about the controllers and those that the puppet masters behind the matrix. That's why they continually have to push humanity down with their programming through the media and people like Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus. It's through actual mind control programs that these young ladies and a lot of these young kids, these celebrities and so on, that they're in these programs, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think they want to do this stuff, honestly.
No, they don't want to do this stuff. And
I think they don't have a choice.
Right, they don't have a choice. And so what happens is they're very conflicted people. And that's why you see things like what happened with Britney Spears is they unravel because this is not where they want to be. And they're trying to break out.
So what else caught your attention there on the lineup there, Michael?
I thought the Savior programming was, there weren't any bullets under it, but I think we should talk about this, Cara, because Savior programming is all around us every day.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is. I mean, and it's just, you can start with the churches and things like that, but starting with the churches and religious upbringings and all of the different so-called spiritual schools worldwide is to risk getting back into just to talk about it, you're in the entrainment. It's one of the reasons I don't talk about money, because when you talk about money, everything else just shuts off, and you can't think about anything else, because that's how powerful the black magic is. So I don't talk about the religious stuff too much. What I talk about with Savior programming are the people who somehow manage to come along and try to attain guru status. I say this about Harold. I say that this is Savior programming that's taken over to a great extent. There are other people. Kesh is another one. Whatever he's putting out, that's great. He also calls himself a savior. And so, I think you have to be very, very careful with people like that. I can't remember who else I've got. Simon Parks can very much come off like a savior. He talks about meditating CERN into submission. I don't know.
Well, politicians too. Politicians, but people.
Yeah, any politician,
yeah.
Sure. And that's actually something we can talk about, Michael, because one of the things I get really fed up with is this idea that people don't understand. Listen, let me give you an example of how addicted we get to this stuff, okay? And I'm going to use my beautiful, lovely, wonderful mother to make this example. God love her. Look, the sacrifice she made for the world was huge. But we would talk about something that she had seen she was looking at on CNN, some piece of trauma that they were trotting out, and oh, isn't it horrible? And she would be distraught and staring at the screen and things like that. And I would say to her, Mom, you realize this is all bullshit, right? There's nothing on there that isn't absolute bullshit that you're looking at. You do know that, right? And she would look at me and she would literally say, yes, I do know that. And I believed her. And then, like a magnet, her head would go back around toward the television and she would be, captured again and clucking her tongue about whatever it was that was so horrible. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is how addictive it is, what they do to us. Politics is another one. Politics is 100% social engineering, collecting data to figure out how to move the herd.
And it's savior programming. That guy he's going to save us. He's going to pull us out of all the pain and suffering. That we have it going on right now in this country. Just real quick, Cara.
Yeah.
Trump,
go ahead.
right?
Yeah.
Trump.
Right.
Trump is going to be the savior. We're going to put a new head on a body in the Oval Office.
Right.
And because of the words that he's saying. And the savior mentality says, in my view, that you personally feel like you don't have to do anything. You could just sit there like a big load, and somebody else is going to take care of all this stuff for you.
Right.
You don't have to do a damn thing.
Right.
And this is the problem that we have, that humanity has, is the fact that too many people think that way, that they can just sit down on their duffs and somebody else is going to take care of it all for them.
Right.
They don't have the gumption to get up or the motivation to go about and make things happen.
Right.
And as long as people continue to think that way, by the way, folks, and again, this is my perspective, I'm not speaking on behalf of Cara, then we're going to continue to have a lot of challenges.
Yes, to say the least. That's a kind way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times I listen to somebody go off about something political or some election or blah, 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 and I actually say the words, all political contests are a false array of choices, trotting out nothing but dialectics, and meant to be nothing but social engineering, data collecting to move the herd. I can't even tell you how often I say that, and yet we are so hooked into these goddamn meaningless contests, right?
Yep.
We can't stop ourselves. We're just addicts. We can't stop ourselves. Right now the whole thing is Bernie in the States, right?
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders. Is that his last name, Sanders?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders.
To me, he's no different than Ron Paul. He's just the other edge of the spectrum, and they're trying to figure out how many people are hooked into his stuff, into his political,
Yeah, I think he's different than Ron Paul. I'll just give you my perspective.
Well, okay, but you know what I mean. In terms of gathering of social data, it's just gathering social data at the other pole.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, all of these candidates represent a segmentation of the population. So how many people are in Bernie's camp? How many people are in Trump's camp? How many people are in Hillary's camp? Mm-hmm. So this is how they're able to dissect and analyze the data.
Right.
How do we manipulate next? What's the next set of programming that's got to go out so that we can steer the herd in a certain direction?
Right.
There's no doubt. There's no question about it. And I've mentioned this on other shows, Cara. This is why we have polls. What they're doing is they're trying to figure out how much more manipulation they have to do in order to get you into a certain direction. When I say they, I'm talking about the controllers again.
Right.
That's what polls are all about. Polls are just figuring out where you're at with your thinking. Because if you're not where they need you to be, well, they just have to tweak the model a little bit and get you to where they need you to be, which is, wherever.
Right. Yeah, and every time you take one of those little quizzes on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing, is you're giving them data.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean anything. It means nothing other than they're collecting data, and they're collecting data on a global scale now.
That's
so they can manipulate us and move us. So there's that. And that is part of the Savior programming. And that started with because while I'm writing this chapter on history, I hate to actually try to nail anything down right now. For example, in my chapter on Prussian education system, I do a timeline on the people who brought up this idea of compulsory education and being educated for the benefit of the state and all of that, and I take it back to Plato. But how the hell do we know what he said, or if he even existed? Mike, do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
All of that could be just a big old line of crap to have us believe that it had been thought of before and justification. So we really just have to dig through all this stuff and try to figure out for ourselves what is actually real. Yeah, so the Savior programming, Somebody else who's doing that big time right now is Stephen Greer. Have you noticed this with him? You know who I mean. His name's Dr. Stephen Greer.
I know.
He looks like, to me, I'm going to say this, I'll probably get in trouble psychically, but the guy has always looked to me like a giant reptile in a human suit anyway, with the bulging reptilian everything. I keep waiting for his tail to come out somewhere, but it's even more so now. And I know a couple of people, including Miles Johnston, who have seen him speak here in London recently, and he's doing these lectures wherein he asks you to invite the alien into your heart.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get anywhere until we invite the aliens into our hearts.
Yeah.
And then after he trots that business out, he says, I'm going to play for you now this communication between us and the aliens that I have. And so he emits this massively destructive, razor-sharp frequency at the audience and actually paralyzes you. It's horrific, I'm told. I haven't been part of it. But those of you who might be getting ready to go see Dr. Stephen Greer, be aware that this will happen to you. He will play over the loudspeakers this tone that he claims is alien in nature that will cause you to be profoundly uncomfortable and just about paralyzed. You will not be able to move. And it goes on for quite some time, I'm told.
You don't have to convince me about him. I never, ever put any stock into Stephen Greer. I always thought that he was disinformation, that he works for an alphabet agency or maybe multiple alphabet agencies. And the thing that, very early on when he would go and do his lectures and he would say, and I was invited to speak to the Joint Chiefs of Staff about aliens and about UFOs and everything else. And I thought to myself, really?
Why?
You? The Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't know anything about the aliens or the UFOs. They had to bring you in. And by the way, he's a former MD, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just concocted. And he's put out there because people resonate with him because he was a doctor and now look what he's doing. He's into aliens and he wrote that book. I think the book was called Disclosure. And but look, my thoughts on Stephen Greer, right? Mm-hmm. A time waster. I wouldn't spend any time on anything that man says because I believe it's all disinformation.
Well, I think the most important thing to and I will do the Savior programming at length in the book, but the most important thing to bear in mind is that what they want, what the predator, and I think that it's, I say the predator, but it's also kind of a succubus type predator. What they want more than anything is for us to forget that we have any sovereignty at all, that we have any power over anything. And so this entrainment that we've got that someone from outside is going to have to come and save us because we're too stupid or powerless or whatever to do it on our own, they have everything invested in that. They have everything invested in that. So the minute you don't buy into that anymore, and then you know that you really know that we can save ourselves and you can save yourself, you're breaking a big piece of entrainment, and you'll notice when it starts to come over you again, look around at the society and see what's built upon those sorts of things, what leads you back to someone who can come and rescue you.
Yeah.
It goes on constantly. And the reality is we're more powerful and mightier than anything else that's out there right now. That's the reality. So, so the Savior programming is a very big part of Stuart Sverdlow, whatever you may or may not think of him. I haven't actually investigated him too thoroughly, but he just did a basis interview. And in the process of that interview, he talked about the reptilian, the Draco Savior agenda. And the Draco Savior agenda includes a return of the baby Jesus Christ. Now, what did I just say about my ex-writing partner? He told me he was Draco, right? There is a Draco Savior agenda. And it rolls out with the new birth of Jesus Christ, which Harold says has happened, and the child is 2 years old. Okay, Savior programming there. All right, I don't know. So the question is, when I work on books like this, the main point is to find a path through. Yeah, and if history is not our friend, if we have no history that we can count on, what do we have? One of the things we have is mythology, Michael. We have the myths. We carried the myths orally down through the years, yeah?
Right.
And there's a reason that that kind of thing is oral histories and things. They've tried to do away with those completely because that's something they can't control, and that has come down through the years. The Bach saga is another thing you should look up. That's an oral history. One family is in charge of repeating that story, and it takes something like 10 years to repeat. The last person who attempted to do that was finally killed with an attempt on his life twice with a ritual knife murder. And the fact that it was a ritual should tell you something. But that will also be in, those sorts of things will also be in the book. And then the third installment, I hope, is really just about the magic of who we are. Because I don't like to write hand wringers, Mike. You know that. I don't like to write things that end with, "Oh God, what are we gonna do?" You know. No, I don't like that. I do not consent to doing that. So the third book will hopefully be just about recapturing our magic. You know, I have to tell you something. You know, I'm a Waldorf teacher, right?
Yep.
You know that.
Yep.
And I'm teaching right now in London, which I'm very lucky to be doing because I'm just very lucky to be doing it. It's all oral tradition. There are no textbooks. The teacher brings everything orally. And I want to tell you this because it goes to education. Right about the end of the Chinese Revolution, you had this huge country filled with stunned, clueless people who had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next, yeah? Ripe for the freaking Prussian education system to walk in, which it did, through our beloved so-called education pioneer, Thomas Dewey, who is nothing more than a Fabian socialist. He went immediately after the Chinese Revolution to spread, and it worked well. It worked very well. They fell into line instantly, and now people call it the big hive mind. The big hive mind, right? But let me tell you something. I had a Chinese intern in my classroom last week. Guess what the number one fastest growing form of education in China is today?
What would it be?
It's Waldorf.
Okay, good.
They're looking for their souls, man. They're looking for their souls again. Okay? Waldorf is huge in China, spreading like wildfire. And I hope this woman comes back to my classroom because dealing with her was unbelievably interesting because their issues and how Waldorf education addresses those, which is all about the imagination. It's all about storytelling. It's all about protecting the connection between the left and right hemisphere, yeah? The three problems that they have is that Waldorf kids tend to be very, very unself-conscious and very much on purpose, and which is how human beings are supposed to be, this false adolescence crap, you know, that got laid on us thanks to Margaret Mead. It's not true. We're supposed to be unself-conscious, joyous, take a big bite out of life beings, and that happens in most Waldorf classrooms. So she wanted to know how to make that happen in a culture where people are very inward, people are very shy, people are very hesitant to express themselves in any way. So that was very interesting to me. The other couple of things were that Chinese parents tend to drill their children in academics, which you can't do and be a Waldorf kid. You know, there's a time and a place for everything, and that's not it. Being drilled in this crap when you're 5 is not it, I promise. Okay, there was that, and then there was this this long history of only having one child, and trying to have it be a male child. Every kid in your classroom is a little emperor, and you're trying to form this community. So, isn't it terrifically interesting that they're trying to address these social ramifications, these social ills, these dead ends with, my beloved pedagogy? So go Rudolf Steiner, smartest man that ever walked the face of the earth, you know. And another thing is, a lot of things that are happening in the schools, especially in Britain, is because Great Britain in 2004, the Steiner schools, they call them Steiner schools here, decided to get in bed with the government so they could get extra funding for their kindergartens. They now have to meet government criteria, which to me makes me break out in a rash. You know, I lecture against that constantly, right? But, you want money from the government, this is what happens. You're being, Anyway, a lot of what's happening is that the government wants us to put our planning on a computer. And they have yet to figure out how to get a Waldorf plan, whether it's weekly, monthly, block, or daily plan, onto a computer. It doesn't go. There's no format that will capture what it is.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Why not? Because I guess the way they
No,
have it traditionally structured, the Waldorf approach does not fit into their structure.
doesn't go. It
Right.
doesn't go. Rudolf
Okay.
Steiner, you freaking genius.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is my plug for Waldorf. I mean, these alternative education systems are also battlegrounds. They're constantly after us. Constantly after us. Okay. And just getting into the bed with the government in Great Britain is one of the ways that sometimes we capitulate. That has not happened in the United States. We want to stay as far away from the U.S. government as we can. But what has happened in the U.S. is we have this education system that makes wonderfully open young individuals that should not be subjected to media, and parents aren't keeping that edict. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a problem. That's a problem. There's video you can get, the Waldorf School of Silicon Valley. Those guys, they don't let their kids watch TV, play video games, or
Steve Jobs. Steve
yeah,
Jobs.
hang out with any media at all till they're about 12, which is what we say globally anyway, because they know it screws them up.
Yep.
They just, but America's got to hear that message. What exactly are you losing, Mike? If you turn off the news till your kid's 12, what are they missing?
Not missing anything. And that's see the problem that we have, Cara, is it's not the children, it's the adults, it's the parents, it's the guardians who are so entrained and so stuck on the hamster wheel, and so their head is like cemented in.
Yep.
That's what has to get broken. It's the adults that have to be reached to say, hey, look, would you please wake up? Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to have a perpetual motion machine of generation after generation after generation is going to raise their kids the same way, basically in a big box of lies.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So it's got to stop. The other thing I would recommend, without getting into the conversation, because I know that you're kind of limited today as to your time, but the other thing I would tell you to do, without getting into a big conversation about it, is to stop joining the freaking military. Yeah. Stop joining up. They can't run a war if nobody comes. All right? Stop. There can be no huge blood sacrifices if there's nobody there to shoot people. And the people who are coming back from these so-called wars, they're ravaged. They're ravaged souls. You're not doing anything patriotic. You're not doing anything good. You're not doing anything productive. You're just sending your sons and your daughters to be absolutely torn to shreds by demonic principles. So stop, we want peace. We want peace, Michael. Stop joining the freaking military.
Right.
If there's no military force, maybe we have a chance. It's so easy. You want peace? Stop joining up, man.
They're always promoting war. I mean, it's everything. It's on TV. It's in the magazines. It's on the radio. It's by a hat with the Air Force, Marines, Army on it. All of this stuff, bumper stickers. And what people don't understand is that what's going on here is you're not fighting for democracy. You're not fighting for freedom. What you're doing is you are furthering the agenda of imperialists who are looking to colonize the world. End of discussion. And to protect and also to grow the profits of the corporatocracy that is totally in bed with what's going on across the world with these wars. And what happens is, your kid comes home, while they're in the military, they've got them on cocktails of psychotropics, which cocktails means 2, 3, 4 different types of psychotropics. They come home, they're maimed, and then they want to make it sound and look really good by saying, hey, you got your legs blown off. You know what? We're going to put 2 prosthetic devices on you, and you're good to go. And it's really a sick, very sick depiction and portrayal of what they're really being used for.
Exactly. And it's the blood too, Mike.
It is the blood. It's the blood
sacrifices.
And it's unbelievable what's going on, And they want to show you a Special Olympics where a bunch of guys or gals were maimed in war, and because they can, play basketball in a wheelchair. Don't get me wrong. I'm really glad that person who was an amputee can do that. But my point being is they shouldn't be in a wheelchair.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right.
They should have their legs. They should have their arms. They should their body should be intact. And it's just folks, listen to me, okay? Yeah. I'll go off on the rails on this thing. Think about it, okay? Because we're not spreading freedom.
No, and we have a predator who lives on blood, those blood rituals, the energy from those blood rituals. That's, just a big part of it as well.
Yep.
Not so. Okay. The other thing I want to tell you, because I know, like I said, I know you're limited today, but there's another project in the works that probably won't come out till 2017. I am really lucky. Have you ever interviewed Maria Wheatley?
I have not. She's a friend of mine on Facebook, but I have not.
You need to.
Okay.
You need to interview the both of us in about early 2017 because we're working on something together. Maria and I are working on a book. It's called Guardians of Fire and Blood, The Search for the Celtic Heart.
All right.
And as you know, Maria is a master dowser, and she's an amazing, I want to call her a guardian of Avebury, but I don't think she likes to call herself guardian of anything. And she and I are going to retrace her steps a little bit in terms of looking for some of the stuff that she's been looking for. She wants to find the Celtic heart. She thinks together we can do it. I believe her. Let's go, right? Let's go. I'm going to, she's going to lecture in Belfast in March or April, something like that. I think I'm going to try to get over there with her because we want to visit the site of the Battle of the Boyne. Do you know about the Battle of the Boyne?
No.
William, supposedly it was a real battle, but it wasn't. It was a ritualistic battle. Anyway, we'll talk about that at another time. But yes, the Battle of the Boyne was actually a ritualistic battle. Miles thinks it was a battle that actually discussed an alien entity coming to the planet. And frankly, one of my chapters is on CERN and Kali and how that all fits together, Kali and Shiva and CERN. We had a long talk about this, and we kind of figured out and fit together that this thing that went up on the side of the Empire State Building, remember that?
Yeah.
Kali?
Yeah,
on
they
the
projected
okay.
the goddess Kali.
Well, the guy that supposedly put that up, his last name was Psi Hoyos, and I took that apart as Psi meaning particle physics. Hoy is a boat that conveys goods along rivers in Scotland. It's a very old word, and OS being operating system. And so then we started talking about the Battle of the Boyne and how that was a ritual enactment of that caliber, celebrating or manifesting an artificial intelligence that came to this planet.
Oh, okay.
So, and them putting it on the side of the Empire State Building is just them having to tell us what they're doing to us. Yeah? So there's a chapter in there on CERN and Kali. And you have to know that Kali, by the way, is the name of the infrastructure that does the delicate calibrations inside CERN. They call it Kali.
Yeah.
And there's a statue of Shiva outside that building. So it's all about,
Yeah, well, Kali, the goddess Kali, is about change and transformation, but they don't tell you what kind of change and transformation
right.
they have planned.
Right.
Okay?
What are they doing?
Exactly,
right?
exactly. It's
doing?
change and transformation, but it may not be good for humanity.
Exactly. And some people think that they're trying to open up a Stargate.
Yeah.
What is it? An Einstein-Rosen bridge and all of that.
Yeah.
My speculation, Mike, and I don't know, people might laugh at me when I say this, but I speculate that human beings don't need Stargates. I don't think we need them. I think others need them to get here, back and forth. I don't think we need them because we have a relationship to a pretty powerful Stargate. That's the sun. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's another radical statement for you. I don't think that human beings actually need Stargates, right? But other people do, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they're trying to punch their way off the planet. My sense has never been that CERN is a big threat. Again, another radical statement. But people... Go ahead.
I was going to say that the stuff that they know, and when I'm talking about they again, I'm talking about the quote-unquote the controllers, what they know and what they do is so far beyond anything that most people think about on any given day. It's incomprehensible to most people.
Right.
So even though like you and I are having this conversation and some folks might think it's kind of weird and out there, like we're talking about maybe you don't need food. Maybe you can get your nutrition from the sun. People would think, oh, that's crazy, right?
Right. Okay. All right.
But if they knew what these people are working on and what they're trying to do,
right,
getting nutrition from the sun would seem like, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. So, they have no comprehension of what these people are engaged in, and it's
I know, and that's why this is a workbook, and that's why I'm slapping people up the side of the head with the radical statements to begin with, and then working my way back down every chapter to something that might be more palatable. But the reality is, this is where we live. Okay? This is where we live. We're watching our children die. Yeah, we are. I know we are. Admit it out there. You can't deny it anymore. They're killing our kids every day, and we're all miserable. What the hell do you have to lose by investigating this stuff and really finding out who you are? You find out who you are. You don't need a guru. You don't need a savior. None of that. You don't need any of that. I don't care if the Pope gets up on a giant popsicle stick and declares there's one world religion. It's still savior programming. Walk away.
It's just another minion of the trollers that just loom behind the scenes. It's people have got to wake up. They have to wake up.
And you know what? Somebody suggested to me the other day, this is just a little beside the point, but it untied a big knot for me. I never could figure out how the hell I ended up in Europe. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
How the hell did I end up over here? Just like I got the book out that was my mom's, you know what I mean? And then boom, it felt like somebody just spun me around and aimed me at Europe and gave me a giant drop kick, and here I was. And then things started to go right in terms of my getting the word out, and things started to happen, and people started to give a shit and help me get it out into English. Somebody said to me the other day, Jerry McLaughlin, we were at the Celtic exhibit at the Museum of something or other. Can't remember, British Museum, I think. She says, because you're in London. It's because you're in London. The pipes stay clean here for the elite, for the bad guys. Everything goes out from here unblocked because it has to. Okay. So if you're operating here in London in this middle of the spider's web, of course your stuff's going out, because there's nothing but pipeline out to the rest of the world from here.
Right.
So does that explained it to me in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
I thought,
that makes
okay.
sense.
That's okay. I'm using the enemy's frequencies to get my work out. So that explains the whole thing, and that explains why I feel as if I just can't go back to the States. I'll get buried again. You know what I mean?
This is a tough place over here, Cara. And I know you know because it is tough. It's like swimming through concrete that's drying. It's just when you talk to people and you try to interact with them and you try to get the message out, get them to notice things.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah, and then the question is, where do you start? Which thread do you pull? And that's really up to them. You give them as many threads as you can. They're going to pull the one that's the prettiest to them, the most intriguing to them, and then they're going to take their own journey. And that's mythology. That is the hero's journey, and that's what Joseph Campbell said. There's only one story, and that's the hero's journey, and each one of us is that person.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are included in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Sometimes I feel so tired, but today I feel so wired. And I look through my crystal ball. All I see is that wall. So many people are standing still, drifting away. They lost their will. I just want to shake them and give them ears. Wake up. living in fear. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. Sometimes I feel so cheated. But today I won't be defeated. I cut the chains and I break free. Open your eyes and you will see. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. We are here to live and learn. Another life, another turn. Don't be afraid to shine. Don't be afraid to open your mind. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. You are a beautiful soul.